Hello everyone and welcome to Thorough Newspaper Analysis, which is brought to you by LawSeco. So these are the articles that we will be discussing today. First, in labor codes, what changes for workers, hirers? This is from the Indian Express. And dilution without adequate deliberation. This is from the Hindu. So both the articles, they talk about the changes that have been brought in the labor laws in India and what are the impacts of these changes both on the workers as well as the employers, that is the hirers, we'll study in this article. Secondly, railroading the bill from the Indian Express and a point of order from the Hindu. This basically talks about the crisis, in a way, if we can call it, in the parliament that is existing, and what is the issue and why the parliament is so reluctant in sending so many bills to the select committees or various other standing committees, and what can be the consequences of that we'll be studying in here. And thirdly, UN and the new multilateralism. So we have been discussing this several times, but then again, how is it important for this entire globe, for this world, to follow the norm of multilateralism and to understand that UN also needs to have this multilateral approach if it really wants to achieve its goals. So this is again from the Indian Express, and finally we have the news in flash. But before moving forward, let's have a look at the LawSeco courses that we have for you. We have the Lord of the Courses, which is Judiciary Test Prep course. And if you are also preparing for judicial services, you can enroll yourself in this course. The link is there in the description box below. And you can also download for yourself free study material if you want any kind of assistance with that. Then we have various other courses also. They can be viewed at the LawSeco webpage. Now let's see that what is the multiple choice question for the day. Ruth Bader Ginsburg was associated with the cause of, so like she has recently, she has expired, she has passed away, and you need to identify as to which of the following causes was she associated with. Firstly, gender equality, child labor, climate action, or nature conservation. So if you know the answer to this question, do jot it down in the comment section below. Then we have the descriptive question for the day. Labor laws in India should follow a balanced approach in defining the rights of employers and employees. Discuss. So you have to argue as in why is it necessary for the labor laws to be equal and balanced when it comes to giving the rights and duties to both the employers as well as the employees. So you have to write down this answer in a word limit of maximum 250 to 300 words. With this, let's quickly start with a discussion of the first article for the day, which talks about the labor law reforms in India. Recently, the government has introduced in Lok Sabha 3 new versions of the labor codes, namely the Industrial Relations Bill 2020, the Code on Social Security Bill 2020, the Occupational Safety, Health and Working Conditions Code Bill 2020. Basically, as we know that after the pandemic of COVID-19 has hit the Indian market, the Indian economy, the condition that the laborers had to face was not really good for them. As we know that the migrant workers had to be displaced in huge numbers. There was such a huge retrenchment and also loss of jobs. Retrenchment is something that simply in Hindi language we call as chutney, wherein if any company, any firm or any place, any industry, it suffers through any economic crunch or there is any kind of economic crisis or lack of resources, lack of capital or any other reason, similar reason, what the employer tends to do is that he cuts down the number of workers working in over there. And this cutting down of numbers and taking a lot of people out of their jobs is called the process of retrenchment. So as we know that even many employers, they were pleading in the Supreme Court that they will not be able to pay proper wages to their laborers since they also are facing such an economic crunch and they do not have money to do so in that. So it was much debated and contravened as well many times that the Supreme Court had given the judgment that yes, it is not like that you do not pay them at all, but yes, some flexibility can be seen if the employer does not have money to pay the employees. Now, in such a scenario, it was noticed that the labor laws in India were found to be too complex to be properly followed, and that is why it led to a lot of harassment and exploitation of the laborers as well. And many a times, even the employers had to suffer a lot of loss. Another thing that we need to understand is that when we talk about the ease of doing business in India, that how much is it easy for any firm to open, work, and as well as close down in India. One of the biggest reasons that actually hurdled the ease of doing business in India was also the complex nature of the labor laws in it. And that is why a new effort has been taken by the government to have introduced 3 bills in Lok Sabha, namely these, as we've already discussed. And this would actually, they would make an endeavor to bring down a number of labor laws into one umbrella law, and would try to minimize the complexity that exists currently. So in 2019, 4 labor codes, namely regulation of wages, occupational safety and health, social security, and industrial relations, were introduced to replace 29 existing laws. Now, as I just mentioned, that we have had a plethora of legislations that concern with the labor laws, and they are actually so many in number that firstly it is very difficult to understand them, and secondly it is very difficult to amalgamate them and use them properly in a coherent manner, and thirdly it is really difficult and it becomes really cumbersome for the employers as well as employees to seek benefits and their rights and duties out of these laws. So that is why an effort to amalgamate these various laws, labor laws, was really necessary, and it was much needed. So the Code on Wages was passed by the Parliament, and the other 3 codes were sent to the Standing Committee on Labour. Now, as just yesterday we discussed that the Parliament has a lot of committees, like we have the Joint Parliamentary Committees, we have the Standing Committees which are also permanent in nature, then we have the Select Committees that are ad hoc or temporary in nature. So for most of the departments, we have their own standing committees that actually discuss upon the facts and upon the bill that has to be passed or that has been passed, and it actually does a more of scrutiny of a particular bill. So other 3 codes, as we discussed, they were sent to the Standing Committee on Labour for further discussion and debate. Now, the 3 codes have been replaced by the government with their newer versions. So now those 3 codes, which were earlier brought in to the scrutiny of the Standing Committee, have now been revised again, and these are these ones which have now been introduced in Lok Sabha. Several aspects of the new bills are different from the earlier bills. So basically, the new bills make significant changes to regulations of labor and the employer-employee relationship. So firstly, there can be severe changes that can be seen when we talk about the regulation of the labor, and then also the relationship between the labor and the employee and the employer has also seen drastic changes. And then several aspects of the new bills are different from the earlier bills. So this is a comparative analysis of the 2019 bill, which was brought to the eye of the Standing Committee, and this is the 2020 bill. These are the 2020 bills that have been now introduced in the Lok Sabha. So in 2019 bill, it defined manufacturing unit as a factory employing 10 workers if the industry or the factory is run by electricity, and 20 if it is run without electricity. Whereas in the 2020 bill, it has increased the threshold and increases the threshold to 20 with electricity and 40 without electricity. Now here, with and without electricity, as we all know, that there are several industries that need electricity no matter what, right? So they need electricity. So those industries now will have to have 20 people employed, and then only it will be called a manufacturing unit. And for without electricity, it will be called as 40. Now, for example, there is a particular cotton mill that actually uses the machines to wind the cotton or to mill the cotton. So that will be something based on the electricity. Whereas if we have a small scale industry that works on manufacturing some kinds of home baked biscuits that are actually baked using only the heat or any home utensils or something, or if you have a industry that uses something like what we call as the papad making industry, these things. So these industries will be called as without electricity. Then the second point is, it required an establishment employing over 100 workers to seek government approval before retrenchment. Now, as we just told, that the thing chutney, which we call in Hindi retrenchment, the process wherein the employment is cut down and various people are taken out of their jobs. So if in this case, the employer had to carry out a retrenchment, and so it had to seek government approval if it had more than 100 workers. But then again, it has been increased to a threshold of 300 workers. Now, why this point is much criticized and worthy of criticism, we'll study in the next slide. So it did not, thirdly, it did not provide the government with power to exempt establishment from any or all provisions. So as we know that there are a lot of provisions of the labor laws. So here in the 2019 bill, no power was provided to the government to exempt or, to let go of any of the provisions. So no power was there with the government. But on the contrary, in the 2020 bill, the government is provided with the power to exempt any establishment from any or all provisions of the three bills. So it now totally depends on the government that it can or cannot exempt or let go of any provisions, any or all provisions of these three bills. So in 2019, it was applicable to establishments or contractors which employed at least 20 contract workers. So if we talk about the contract workers thing, so at least the contractor had to have 20 contract workers working for him. But then again, this threshold has been raised to 50 workers and prohibits employment of contract workers in any core activity. So as we know that contract workers are those who are employed for temporary or for a temporary job on an ad hoc basis, and that is why it says that there will be a prohibition if on any kind of employment of the contract workers for any core activity. For core activities, for the main activities or the internal activities, you need to have proper employees, whereas only for the outer activities you can have contract workers. And then finally, it allowed government to prohibit employment of women in undertaking operations dangerous to their health and safety. So earlier there was a blanket ban or prohibition on the employment of women in hazardous or health dangerous activities. But now this prohibition has been removed, and it is removed actually, and instead it is provided with adequate safeguards. So in a way now we can employ women in activities that are dangerous in nature, but yes, we need to have proper and adequate safeguards. Now let us see that what are the concerns that have been raised. Firstly, raising the threshold for standing orders will water down labor rights in establishment with less than 300 workers. Now, in just the previous slide, as we studied, that earlier it required 100 workers to seek government approval before retrenchment, which means that these workers were protected because the government actually would look into proper merits of the case, and then only it would decide as to any retrenchment can be carried on or not. But now this threshold of 100 workers have been risen to 300 workers, which means that all those workers who are working below a number of 300 in any firm, industry, any factory, etc., they would not be protected by the government, and the government would not be able to save them from the process of retrenchment. So here it provides the flexibility to the employers in hiring and firing. Now, if the employer has employees less than 300 in number, then he can hire or fire according to his own whims and fancies, and the government will have nothing to say into this. So this will actually demolish the employment security. Then next, it makes legal strike impossible. Now, how come that is done? So as we know, this is the IR code, this one which we were talking about, the Industrial Relations Bill. So according to it, it proposes that no strike shall take place in which situations? Firstly, without 60-day notice period. Now, can you imagine, like if some action, some decision has been taken by the employer today, so you will first have to serve a notice that will be prevailing for 60 days, and only after that you will be able to go on the strike. So in a way, it makes legal strike impossible. Then during the pendency of proceedings before a tribunal, the strikes would not be allowed, and 60 days after the conclusion of such proceedings. So in a way, 60 days before and during the pendency in the tribunal, and even 60 days after the decision has come out from the tribunal. So in a way, it will be such a long period wherein the cause for which the strike was actually would have actually come up will actually be defeated. Then next, it says that it increases the burden of marginal contractors for ensuring workers' protection. So in a way, the Occupational Safety, Health and Working Conditions Code provides for a lump sum fare to be provided by the employer as journey allowance. Now, as we know that many a times, many contractors hire the contract workers for just 2 to 3 days, or only for a very small purpose, for some emergency construction they need to do or something like that. But now this will actually bring down, like there are some marginal or small scale contractors as well who do not really have a lot of money by themselves. But then according to the Occupational Safety, Health and Working Conditions Code, this contractor would have to pay a fare, lump sum fare, as in altogether would have to give the conveyance fees or conveyance money to that particular contract laborer for moving from one place to another. And then it replaces the earlier provision for temporary accommodation of workers near the work sites. So as you must have noticed that wherever construction used to go on, like a huge construction, that nearby only some kacha houses were used to be built by the laborers, and they used to stay over there only so that the proximity between the construction site and the residents can be ensured, and they can travel very easily without paying any fare. But now this would not be allowed, and they will have to move from their own homes wherever they live, and the charge of that or that fare would be paid by the contractor, which is again hampering the rights of the contractors, marginal contractors specifically. Now let's look at the second article for the day, which talks about the parliamentary crisis in India. Recently, the deputy chairman of Rajya Sabha, who has recently been chosen, Harivansh Narayan Singh, refused to conduct a division of vote on two controversial pieces of legislation. Now, just as yesterday we discussed that the parliamentary system in India is actually, becoming a lot of unilateral in nature, because earlier a lot of consensus was considered, but now it is not happening, which is a very unfortunate thing to see. So what happened was that 8 opposition MPs were suspended by the chairman, and no confidence motion against the deputy chairman was rejected by chairman, citing improper format. So what are the two important contexts that frame the current crisis? Firstly, parliamentary procedures, and second, the substantive issues. So firstly, as we know that the question hour was unnecessarily suspended, and now as we know that in this monsoon session, the question hour has been suspended, and the 0 hour it will be only used very merely, it will be used. So this also is one of the biggest reasons. Then the government's reluctance to send the bills of standing committees. Now, as just yesterday in our discussion, we very nicely discussed that as compared to the 15th or 16th Lok Sabha, this Lok Sabha, which is the 17th Lok Sabha, it actually has, referred very less of bills to the standing committees for further discussion, whereas earlier approximately 60 to 70% bills were sent into the committees of the parliament for further discussion. But that now is not happening. Then refusal to allow division of votes. So this also is another problem that is occurring. Then secondly, substantive issues are government's willingness to use COVID-19 as an opportunity to bypass deliberations. Now, as we know that even for putting down or using less of the 0 hour and suspending the question hour, the biggest reason that was cited by the government was the COVID-19 pandemic. So we agree that obviously the functioning of any entity, any institution has been halted, and it has been really affected badly due to the COVID-19. But if institutions like the Parliament of India also, if that is the government of India, will also cite excuses in the name of COVID-19, that really is not really acceptable. Then secondly, division would have placed a record where each member stood on a question. So basically through division of votes, they could have actually put forward their own contentions, and it could have actually placed a record where each member stood on a question, but that actually was not allowed. And then a standing committee could have suggested other possibilities, which was not, obviously was not referred by the parliament. So this is the current crisis that is going on in the parliament, and we really need to come up with good solutions to curb this, because obviously if the parliament will not be willing to take in the vote or the contentions of each and every member of its own, then how are we supposed to understand that every individual or citizen of the country is represented equally? So this should be done with prior concern. Now let's see the next article for the day, which talks about India's approach to United Nations. Yesterday on the 21st September, as it was also the International Day of Peace, United Nations celebrated its 75th anniversary. So the current issues related to the United Nations, as we are really, we're discussing almost every other day, we are discussing something or the other about the United Nations. So firstly, the COVID-19 pandemic has exposed its structural weaknesses because it has failed to respond effectively to the crisis. Now, in a situation where with the means or through the United Nations, the world should have seen huge cooperation in dealing with this pandemic, we actually, unfortunately, have come witnessed to the fact that the United Nations has, we can say that it has failed to bring in the world together to fight this pandemic. And the nations are still, many nations are fighting separately and alone. So many underdeveloped nations and developing nations are still struggling a lot to meet the basic ends and basic health facilities. And the United Nations has not been really able to do a lot about it. Then next, the permanent 5 members of the Security Council. Now, even yesterday or day before yesterday, we again studied about the permanent 5 members and how a unilateral world is drawing up. They're drawing their own hegemony, and how the decisions of the United Nations are also completely hampered by the dominance of these 5 major powers. So by design, favorable to the permanent 5 members in the UN Security Council. Now, as we know that only these 5 permanent members, as we know that the Security Council, which is one of the principal organs of the United Nations, it has a total of 15 member nations. 10 are non-permanent in nature, of which currently India is also a member, and 5 are the permanent members. So these are the US, UK, France, Russia, and China. So these are already one of the most dominating nations in the world, right? And then again, the position that they have been given of 5 permanent members in the Security Council also gives them more leeway to take decisions in their own favor. Then China blocked an important discussion on the origin and sources of the crisis. So this entire crisis that we are going through, so China actually, it used its power and it blocked this important discussion which ought to be taken, but it was not taken ultimately. Then for the United States, it left the WHO, as now we were discussing, that approximately 60%, or a huge, more than half of the funding of the of the World Health Organization comes from the US. And now when the US has decided to leave World Health Organization, we can obviously understand that how crippled the functionings would be when it comes to the WHO. So this actually has brought down its functioning and internally divided on global issues, because Trump's America First versus Joe Biden's emphasis on multilateralism is, again, it is tearing the United States of America apart, because now we know that in November, there will be presidential elections. So all the parties are trying their best to influence the world as well as the local citizens. Then US and Europe are divided in the Iran question as well, because US is in complete anti of Iran, but whereas Europe in some of the other times tries to support Iran and makes it tries to bring it in a good position. So then let's see that what is India's approach to United Nations. So the steps that we need to keep in mind for a multilateral world is, firstly, we should shed the illusion that the expansion of P5 is within the reach. So basically, we are actually, India also is arguing, and Japan also, we actually argue for each other that we should be also given the chance to be the permanent members of the United Nations, of the Security Council. But then again, we should understand that this is not something that you ask for and you can be given very easily. First of all, India needs to prove its stature at the global world as well, at the global level. And secondly, it needs to make sure that the already 5 permanent members who are there, who actually have created their own hegemony in the world order, they also are convinced to bring in India over there, because obviously their say or no say is something that is really significant in the decision making of United Nations. Then we should realize that the United Nations is more than just the Security Council, because obviously what we have been discussing lately, being Indians, is only and only getting a permanent seat in the Security Council or the hegemony created in the Security Council, this and that. But on the other ends, we have been ignoring the other principal organs and the other areas of United Nations which we need to pay attention as well, be it the resolutions that are passed by the General Assembly or International Court of Justice, etc. and etc. So there is a possibility of shaping the global discourse, and in lines with the decolonization, disarmament, new international economic order should be done, and that is why we should focus a lot on other areas as well. Then focus on the relationship between national interest and multilateralism, and we should ensure territorial integrity, because obviously we know that India has been facing a lot of issues when it comes to the territorial integrity, be it from any side currently. From west we have the Pakistan, from eastern side we have China as well as Nepal. So all of them have been actually coming down into the Indian territory. So we need to ensure that territorial integrity, as well as we need to understand that how and why multilateralism is so important for our national interest as well. Then finally, protect India's prosperity amidst the current economic, technological as well as environmental disruption. Then strengthen its position through dynamic coalition building and increase contribution to the UN to at least 1%. Now see, any country that actually faces a huge importance, or that actually enjoys a huge importance and power in United Nations, is in some or the other way one of the biggest funders of the United Nations as well. US again is the largest funder of United Nations. It is again the largest funder of World Health Organization as well. Even in World Bank also, US has a lot to do. So that is why obviously, the sponsor, it comes out to be kind of a sponsor, and that is why its decisions, its interests cannot be ignored by these institutions. And India should also make an effort to at least increase its contribution to the UN by at least 1%. China contributes 8%, Japan 10%, and US about 22% currently, which is possibly the largest contributor to the UN. So these are the points that should be kept in mind. Now let's see what do we have for news in flash. First, 2 women naval aviators. So 2 officers, Sub-Lieutenant Kumudini Tyagi and Sub-Lieutenant Riti Singh will be a part of a group of 17 officers of Indian Navy, which were selected as observers in the helicopter stream, becoming the first women airborne combatants who would be operating from warships. So these are the two sub-lieutenants, and we should please recall their name. It's very important, can be a very potential prelims question. Secondly, Parliament passes the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code Second Amendment Bill 2020. So the bill amends the IBC 2016 and increases the threshold for initiating insolvency proceedings from 1 lakh to rupees 1 crore, aimed to protect the MSMEs. Now, as we know, in the economic crunch, MSMEs have been hit really hard. So that is why, to saving themselves from being bankrupt or insolvent, this threshold has been increased from 1 lakh to rupees 1 crore. And the bill replaces the IBC, which is the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Amendment Ordinance 2020. Thirdly, Ruth Bader Ginsburg passed away. She was an American jurist who served as an associate judge of the Supreme Court of the US from 1993 to 2020 and was the second woman judge to serve the US Supreme Court. It's another achievement. She delivered famous judgments such as the United States versus Virginia, in which she ended the men-only admission policy in the Virginia Military Institute. So yes, she worked in the favor of gender parity or gender equality. Fourth, first direct ferry between India and Maldives flagged off. So this will be the first direct cargo shipping line between the two neighboring countries. The service will run twice a month, operated by the Shipping Corporation of India. So despite the geographical proximity, India is only the fourth largest trade partner of Maldives, whereas it could have enjoyed a very higher stance over here. The largest is UAE, followed by China and Singapore. So this was all for today. We hope it was an informative session for you all. Thank you so much.